Hi there, thank you for joining me today for this card making video. My name is Julie Baum. I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up, and my online store can be found at juliebaum.stampinup.net. Today we're going to make a card, start to finish, featuring this set of stamps called Jar of Flowers. There's many looks you can get with this by using the different stamps, by using the punch, also by using the little clear mason jar domes that can be purchased. But we're going to do a simple card with mostly just stamping for our card today. I've started with a card base made out of Bumble Bee cardstock. This started out 8.5 by 5.5, scored down the middle at 4.25 and folded. That's the card base. Then I added a layer of designer series paper, also in the color called Bumble Bee. Bumble Bee is in color for 2020 and 2021. The next layer is a piece of Flirty Flamingo cardstock, and it measures 3.25 by 4.25. So those are the layers that I've created for my card base. Then I also started with a piece of Whisper White cardstock that measured 4.5 by about 3.5. It's just a scrap, but it needed to be large enough for the largest rectangle in the Stitched So Sweetly dies. This set of dies has already become a favorite. I've reached for it many times. We're going to be using the largest rectangle and also the smallest rectangle from Stitched So Sweetly dies. So what I did is I ran this through the Big Shot with the largest rectangle of that set of dies so that I could get this piece. This is the piece we're using on the card, and I love how the edges are scalloped and then also have the stitch lines. So that's very nice. Then I have a scrap of Whisper White cardstock, and what we're going to do on that is stamp a sentiment. I'm using Flirty Flamingo ink pad, and I'm using the Smile stamp. This is actually from a different set of stamps. This is not included in Jar of Flowers, but I've taken it from the stamp set called Lovely You. I really like the sentiments in here, and I really like that scripty font. So I've grabbed the Smile stamp out of that set. So with Flirty Flamingo ink, I'm just going to stamp Smile in the center of just a scrap of Whisper White cardstock. All right, and then from there, I'll take the smallest rectangle die from Stitched So Sweetly, lay that on there and run it through the Big Shot. And to save time, I've done that piece ahead of time. So this is what it looks like after it's been run through. All right, so now we're gonna do a little bit of stamping. I'm using my black ink pad, which is a Memento Tuxedo Black ink pad. And from the stamp set, Jar of Flowers, I'm using one of the stamps that has, I kind of think that it looks like a spring or a summer bouquet. There are some sunflowers and some other little springy looking flowers in that set, but I'm going to grab this one that I think looks summer or springy. It's a mixed bouquet. So I'm going to ink that up well with my black ink pad. And remember sometimes to move your stamp or move your ink pad around when you're inking it up so you can get nice even coverage. And I'm looking at the middle of the stamp to make sure I've got enough black ink on the largest blossom in there. That looks good. Now what I'm going to do is stamp at the very top of this piece. I'm going to pull it towards me just for a moment. Probably not the best camera angle, but I want to get my eyeballs on it, and then I will put it back up in view. So I am pressing down, giving the ink a chance to transfer onto my Whisper White cardstock. If you are comfortable using the Stampin' Pierce mat underneath your stamping when you use photopolymer stamps, that's great. I do some of the time, and some of the time I don't. So clearly this time I did not put my mat under there. Let's see if I have a clean enough impression. Lovely. Okay, So then I'm going to take another scrap of Whisper White cardstock. And on this one, I'm going to stamp the jar, also using my black ink pad. I'm going to stamp it near the bottom of this piece of cardstock. That's just so that I know I can get my punch to slide in there and punch it when I'm ready to punch that out. So there's the jar. Next, I'm going to add the stems to that jar so that we can have stems for our flowers. And on this stem stamp, there's a part at the top that is very straight. That's the part that's going to get lined up with the bottom edge here of my mason jar. And then the bottom has the angles that the stems have naturally fallen into after you drop those flowers into the vase or into the jar. So again, my goal was to get the straight edge of those stems close to the bottom rim of my mason jar, like so. All right, now we're going to put some liquid in our jar, make it look like it's got water in it. And I do want to point out something in this Jar of Flowers stamp set, as in several other sets. When you see in the picture that there's this image and this image, and then we also have it here and here, it's not two separate stamps, but it is two ways to use the stamp. So we're going to use this one, and I'll show you what I mean. If I mount the stamp this way, then I'm going to get the outline and all of those little shadow or shading marks. That's the image that I'm going to get. But if the stamp is reversible, the stamp itself is reversible. So I'm going to turn it over and actually mount it the other way. And what this does is it's going to give me a smooth surface. So I'm going to be able to stamp the water in the jar. And because I already have some of those shading marks from the original stamped jar, I didn't want to add more of those little lines. So I'm using the reverse side, so I just get a nice flat image. And to stamp this, I am reaching for Pool Party. And on this particular card, I've done it both ways. I've done Pool Party in full strength from the ink pad into the jar. On this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and stamp off and then get a lighter color of my Pool Party for the water in my jar. All right, great. Okay, then the next thing I'm going to do is reach for my Stampin' blends and do some coloring. So I'll set this aside. Well, you know what? Let's do the stems first since they're right here. Either Old Olive, the combination of light and dark in Stampin' blends, or the Granny Apple Green is a good choice. Either way you want to go. So let's use Granny Apple Green for today. And I'm going to use the darker one for my stems that are down in the jar. I'm using the bullet end of my marker and literally just drawing in those stems. I chose the darker one on this because I feel like looking through the jar at the stems, and especially the stems that are in water, the stems might look darker. And then I'm actually going to decide if I'm using the darker or the lighter once I get to the surface, once I get to the leaves, which are up on the surface. Okay, so there's my stems, like so. All right, and since we're working on the jar, let's just go ahead and punch that out. This jar punch, super adorable, is available. You can actually bundle the stamp set, Jar of Flowers, with the jar, and by buying the two things at once in a bundle, you save 10%. So I feel like whenever a bundle is offered, whether it's a stamp set with dies or a stamp set with a punch, that's always the best value, and get it while you're able to get it when it's offered as a bundle. So I've got that lined up in my punch, and I have punched that out. All right, so now I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to go ahead and go to my piece here with my flowers that are stamped and do some coloring. The first thing I'm going to do is pink, and this is Flirty Flamingo. This is the light and the dark. And on this particular flower, you know, I don't always use the same method with my Stampin' blends. So today I'm going to start with the darker of the two pins, and I'm literally going to outline the petals of this first flower. So I'm using the bullet end, just gives me some control since I'm outlining. You can move pretty quickly. You don't have to be super careful. Then I'm also going to come in and do some outlining on these. And then because I want some light and dark petals, in addition to the shading that I'm going to get by using both markers, I'm going to color some of these inside petals with the dark pink already so that they're just darker to begin with. So just a couple of them. All right, then snap that lid on. I'm going to use the brush end of my light Flirty Flamingo and literally just fill in the petals. This is the super fast part of the coloring. You'll notice my black doesn't bleed at all because I used that Memento Black ink. It works great for coloring with Stampin' blends. So once I've literally smeared in that light pink color, now I am going to just go back and blend it a little bit on some of those outline darker edges, just pulling that color in a little bit so that the line is not quite so harsh. All right, so I'm using the lighter of the two Flirty Flamingo Stampin' blends, and I'm just pulling in that dark edge a little bit. I'm still going to leave a couple areas that are a little bit lighter than others. I'm going to go back and add a little bit of darker, even though I'm using the lighter marker, just so I get varying colors of that pink and almost a highlight of white in there. All right, then I'm going to switch to the Highland Heather light and dark Stampin' blend. And the same process, I'm going to start with the bullet end of the darker marker. And I'm going to outline the petals of these two flowers. So I'm literally just outlining, the artwork already gives you what you need to know. So I'm just outlining the petals and the centers. Oh, that one was messy. Laying down that darker Highland Heather color. All right, and then in these middles, I'm coloring the center and just kind of coming up with some strokes like that on the center of those two flowers. Oh, here's one more petal over here. All right, then I will take light Highland Heather with the brush end and same process, just lay down color inside all of those petals. So I've got my Flirty Flamingo flower. This one is Highland Heather. And then once I've got the color laid down, be careful on this one. Okay, once I've got that color laid down, I'm going to come back with my darker Highland Heather and the bullet tip and just lay in a little bit of dark in a couple spots. Again, you're just looking for some shading to add some interest. Maybe you missed some on the first pass. All right, and then only because I'm looking at it and it needs a little bit of blending now on what I just added, I'm going to kind of circle around those darker areas that I just added. So I've got some nice dark, I've got some light. I think that's a good blend. All right, let's move on to the green. This time I'm going to reverse my process. So I'm going to start with my brush end of my Granny Apple Green. This is the light, and I'm going to color all over the leaves. So like I said, I don't always follow the same process. I don't have like a rule when it comes to stamping with my Stampin' blends. If I start with dark or light, it really just depends on the project. Probably depends on my mood too. Here is the dark Granny Apple Green. Now I'm going to add some dark on the vein of all of the leaves. And I'm also going to add a little outlining just here and there. Then I'll take my light marker because I want to blend that out a little bit. So I'm just going to use a light and a circular motion over those dark lines that I just made, just to blend that out a little bit. It helps so you don't see the lines of where you started and stopped with each marker. All right, so there's my leaves. All right, now I've got Mango Melody in both the light and the dark. I'll color the 3 flowers in the light first of all. And then I'll take the dark Mango Melody, and I'm just going to outline very little. Just, this is really quick. I'm kind of doing one little squiggle on that petal, on this petal, the outline, and then I'm going to do this whole petal. So I didn't add very much dark on this, just enough to give it some interest. All right, we've got 2 more stops here for coloring. This is Pool Party, and I'm only going to use the darker of the Pool Party Stampin' blends. I'm going to use the bullet end and color in this pretty little sprig. I don't know technically what flower or foliage this is, but on my card it's blue. And then I'm going to use the crumb cake, and I'm also only going to use the dark of the crumb cake, and I will use my bullet end just to give this lovely little sprig some color. It's kind of a natural or a neutral color. Now, if you wanted, of course, you could take the time on these, the blue and also on the crumb cake, to do light and dark and add the shadowing, but to me it's just such a small little sprig. Really, these big flowers kind of have the power on the card, so I just wanted to do quicker more than more detailed. All right, so let me scoop my Stampin' blends off to the side, and I'll show you where we go next. All right, so I'm going to go back to my jar here and grab, let's see where my ribbon went. Oh, here it is. Okay, this is the Bumble Bee, and it's the gingham ribbon, which I just love. This is perfect for this. You can see how it coordinates. And what I'm going to do is lay a piece of Terran tape on the back part of my jar, right up here, like at the mouth of the jar. All right, this is Terran tape, and I've peeled off the backing. And then I'm going to lay just the end of my ribbon here, wrap it around to the front. This is going to give the effect that the ribbon really did wrap all the way around the jar, like so. And then I'll just reach for my paper snips and cut that free. That was literally just a couple of inches of ribbon, if anything, but it's wrapped around there and secured. Then I'll take the ribbon, same ribbon, and on this card, am just going to tie a knot. Again, I'm using such a small amount of this ribbon so that it'll just keep on giving. All right, so I've cut a knot, I've tied a knot there, and I'll trim my ends fairly close to the knot. I'll show you where this is going to go. Okay, I'm going to grab my mini glue dots for this. And I'm just going to stick the knot. Let's see, I want the flattest part of this knot. Let me pull it a little bit tighter. All right, this side is going to be flatter than this side. So I'm going to take the flat part of my knot, stick it to my roll of glue dots, and pull up the dot. And then as you'll see at the end when I show you a variety of cards, oh, sorry for shaking the camera. When I show you a variety, you can see you could put this in the middle or off to the side, wherever you want it. I'm going to put this one off to the side like so, and I'm just sticking it on. So by doing that wrap around and then adding the knot, it gives you the effect that that ribbon has been tied around the jar. I really like it. All right, I'm going to go back to my tear and tape. I'm going to add 3 pieces. This jar is going to get secured to the front of my card very well, and I don't want it to come up. One of my pieces, I'm going to go down the center. I'm also going to stick it, let me scoot up here. I'm also going to stick it to the ribbon and then down the center just to help hold that ribbon down so that it doesn't ever pop out. This again is going to hold the ribbon and come all the way down to the bottom of the jar, and this piece as well. This is just because I want to make sure that it's totally secure and the jar isn't going to pop up off of the card. So I'm releasing all of the backing like so, and then this is simply going to go right underneath my flowers. The positioning is perfect because you have just enough room here at the bottom so that it meets the top, so that the top of the jar meets the bottom of the flowers. I'm going to slide it towards me for a moment so I can see it, and then I'll put it back in better view of the camera. And remember, I had those 3 pieces of tear and tape, so this is really going to stay secured down and isn't going to come up. All right, so we're going to take this piece and now attach it to the card base. And that's so funny. I'm actually finishing this just in time because I can hear the gardeners at my neighbor's house. So it might get a little bit noisy in the background. I apologize. But we are just wrapping this up right now. I've got liquid adhesive on the back of my stamped piece. This is going to get simply layered. Just eyeball your borders, the top, bottom, right and left. And when you're happy with it, set it down. You've got the liquid glue if you're using it. You have a little wiggle room if you need to slide it before it completely dries. I like it. I'm going to turn this over and give it a nice firm press. Remember, the reason I do that is if there's any oil or ink on my fingers, I don't want to be pressing on all of that white cardstock and maybe make it look smudgy. So my trick is always to turn things over and press it from the back when I've added adhesive to my layers. The last piece is we're going to go back to our little smile rectangle that we cut out earlier. I'm going to attach it here to the card. You could place it in many different places on this card design. I'm going to attach mine here, and I will just grab a piece of tear and tape since it's handy here as well. All right, so there's my smile. And I'm going to use a couple different things to make sure that it's straight. You can eyeball this vertical line where the stitching is. You can also watch that this edge is somewhat straight with the edge of this paper, just because you hate to get that far and then have your sentiment be crooked, and then that's going to steal the attention away from all that prettiness. So you do want to make sure that your sentiment is attached nice and straight. Then I'm going to grab a rhinestone just to put one little dot of bling right here on the smile. All right, even though the front is done, I would typically on a colored cardstock base like this like to add a whisper white layer on the inside. So I've got one here that is cut to 4 by 5 1/4. So it's just slightly smaller than the inside of the card. And with my liquid glue, I'm just going to attach that to the inside here. Again, before you lay it down, just kind of eyeball all of your borders, the top, the bottom, the left and the right, to see that it's somewhat straight. Lay it down. I'm going to flip and press. And then one thing that would be super cute, and I did not prepare a piece for this card. Let me see if I have an example of one that was done with it. If I don't, oh, this one does. All right, I'll show you. So what I might like to do on the inside, since this is plain, is maybe use a scrap of this designer paper to add down the spine here or across the bottom, just to put a little bit of color on the inside. You could also obviously stamp another sentiment on the inside if that suited you even better. So let me show you some other cards that have just minor variations, all right? This one is basically the same card, just with a different designer paper. Same with this one and this one. The only difference is the design of the designer paper. Otherwise, those are the same card. This one I did attach the knot in the center, so you can see what that looks like. It can go to the side or the center. And then I wanted to show you this one. This one was done with Daffodil Delight as the designer paper color. And so the ribbon changed also. This is a Daffodil Delight ribbon. And this is what I wanted to show you on the inside. Oh, the other difference on this one is I did this one on a white card base instead of a colored card base. But on the inside, I did add a strip of that designer paper just to give the inside some interest. And then I have one other one. Let me see, it's just out of reach, so let me grab that. All right, it is actually so far out of reach that I can't quite find it. So I'm going to feature that one in a different video. And it is one that shows the jar, the little plastic jar domes. So how to do a shaker card. And so I do want to feature that in a video as well. So I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that you'll try this card and make a few. You know, if you're going to make one, make 2 or 3 at the same time. You've already got all your supplies out, and then you've got one to give right away and one to tuck away and save for another time when you need it. Thanks for stopping by.